How's it going guys, Kris here with another Battlefield Top 10, and today we're going to be going back over the franchise's history and taking a look at those SMGs and PDWs, picking out some of the best along the way. The smaller submachine guns and personal defense weapons are typically more compact, maneuverable firearms in the Battlefield games that are generally better suited for close quarter combat and aggressive play. Always a good option if you want to rush straight on into the action and use some gung-ho tactics. Because every gun's got its own pros and cons, and every gun's going to have its own fans, there is no right or wrong answer when it comes to picking best weapons, so this list is obviously going to be a little bit subjective. But these are just some of my favourites going through the series that I consider to be some of the best. Though do let me know which ones you prefer, and feel free to share your own lists and opinions down below in the comments. I'm sure you're probably going to do that anyway. So let's begin. Here's my top 10 SMGs and PDWs in the Battlefield games. First gun of the video is one that a lot of you guys might not be too familiar with, but it's an SMG that popped up in Battlefield Hardline called the M5SD, which is basically a variant of the MP5 submachine gun which you can equip on all kits, and on both cop and criminal loadouts. So no waiting in between rounds if you want to use it, always a nice little bonus. It's a DLC weapon, which is another reason why it's not exactly the most well-known thing in the world, but it's definitely one of the best SMGs, and even one of the best weapons in Hardline. Not just because it's got an integrated suppressor, which is pretty cool and handy to have in its own right, always useful when you're sneaking around behind enemy lines or rushing around on one of the game's night maps, but it's because that suppressor doesn't really seem to impede the gun's performance, with the M5SD not taking any kind of bullet speed or bullet drop penalty, which is typically linked with the suppressors, basically giving you a free attachment without the downsides. This version might fire a little bit slower than the other two MP5 variants in Hardline, but it makes up for it by having better recoil stats and accuracy. So when you've got a suppressed weapon that can actually perform better at range, I'd say that's a pretty nice advantage to have, making the M5SD one of the better stealth guns in the series. Next up is a weapon that's probably going to be a bit more familiar, especially if you played Battlefield 1, because we've got the MP18 coming in at 9th place on the list. It's considered to be one of the first SMGs ever made in real life, and it's also the first SMG you'll be able to pick up in the game's multiplayer, being one of the more iconic weapons in the whole game. Just because you could stick it on a loadout and use it pretty much straight from the get-go, that doesn't make the MP18 any less of a gun, despite the fact that a lot of people tend to give it a whirl at the beginning, only to move on to other guns as they unlock them over time. The MP18's almost got the perfect balance of attributes, being the slow but steady gun that's easy to use, effective over a wider set of ranges than a lot of the other submachine guns, all whilst killing fairly quickly up close too, where it's designed to excel. Of course, it's not going to shred people up in the blink of an eye like a few of the other SMGs, but having that tighter recoil pattern and those snappy reloads still gives it a hell of a lot of versatility, especially if you choose to run with the trench variant, meaning you can skip aiming down this gun's sights altogether and start shooting earlier from the hip, still having a fairly good level of precision while you do. In 8th place is a funky looking PDW with a funky name to go with it, the Russian made PP2000, which might not exactly have the most competitive fire rate or damage model to go off, but more than makes up for its lethality in other aspects. In the Bad Company games, the PP2000 was pretty much the complete opposite to what it would be further down the line in the likes of Battlefields 3 and 4, having a crazy fire rate of 1000 RPM. It was pretty fun to use in those games, but even though that fire rate got toned right the way down to just 650 RPM later on in the franchise, now making it one of the slowest shooting PDWs, it still turned out to be a pretty good gun nevertheless. That slower fire rate actually went in favour for the PP2000, complementing its generously low recoil stats and higher than average bullet speed to essentially make it a bit of a laser beam. Weapon kick is barely even existent, and you can keep the bullets whizzing by at that slower but manageable rate due to the gun being kitted out with those chunky 45 round magazines in Battlefield 4. All of these factors combined gives the gun more value beyond the ranges PDWs are generally designed to be used at, often allowing it to perform better than a lot of the others outside CQC. Coming in at number 7 is that Italian danger pipe known as the AUTOMATICO M1918, known for terrorising people and generally being a bit of a menace to be up against in Battlefield 1. Now the AUTOMATICO is pretty much the true definition of a bullet hose in a video game. It's a rapid firing 900 RPM stick that can melt people up close, but generally has a bit of a hard time trying to hit anyone beyond those shorter distances, outside of where the SMGs are designed to perform at their best. The thing is, the AUTOMATICO does such a good job at doing its job, There's no wonder why a lot of players with aggressive mindsets like to equip it, and rush them forwards, pushing through the game's tight, claustrophobic trenches and gritty close-quarter interiors, letting the M1918 rip through anyone unfortunate enough to be in front of it at that given time. It's only got the ammo capacity of 25 rounds, but this is offset by the fact that it's got some of the nippiest reload speeds in the game. And with it also being the fastest firing fully automatic weapon in the game too, apart from the Villa Perota, having the AUTOMATICO equipped in a short range firefight is almost always going to give you a great advantage in a one-on-one battle with another player, being one of the most effective, fun guns to use for clearing buildings and tearing your enemies apart within those closer distances. Next up on the list is the Uzi from Battlefield Hardline, which eventually ended up being one of the best mechanic weapons in that game, after the K10 and FMG9 both pretty much got nerfed into the ground. The Uzi kind of functions a bit like the Hardline version of Battlefield 4's PP2000, in the sense that it's got a fairly lazy fire rate, but can stay on target really well over medium ranges, beyond those CQC firefights. It still deals a respectable amount of damage up close, killing in just a few shots, though because it does shoot slower, there's a bit more pressure on you to land those shots if you want to put the other guy down quickly. This is made much easier by the fact that the Uzi's got barely any recoil at all, sort of acting like an improved version of the M45, due to it kicking around less and having access to a foregrip to lower that recoil down even further. Dealing low amounts of minimum damage means that it's still not geared up for long range battles, so you're probably not in the best position to be firing pop shots at a sniper in the distance, unless you want to get taken out. But it still holds out better over longer ranges than most of the other SMGs, and having a decent mag size of 32 shots gives you plenty of firepower to keep you going. When it comes to versatility, the PDW-R is everything you can want from a Battlefield personal defense weapon. It sort of looks like some kind of sci-fi gun you'd expect to see in the Aliens franchise or something, and being a pretty futuristic thing, it obviously wasn't a weapon that popped up in any of those World War games, making its first appearance in Battlefield 3, and then not long after in Battlefield 4. The PDW-R's got a moderate fire rate set in the middle of the board, meaning it's not a slouch, having a steadier, more manageable output compared to a lot of the others, but it's also not quite as competitive in closer ranges, compared to some of the others that shoot quicker. But because the gun uses a stronger cartridge than the other PDWs and SMGs, essentially sharing its bullets with the M16, this generally gives it a stronger power output over distance, increasing its range, often meaning it's got the potential to kill in less shots. Being able to perform better over range is definitely a really nice factor, considering a lot of players you'll actually come across are going to be further away. And to complement this is the gun's faster than average bullet speed, actually topping out with the fastest PDW muzzle velocities in Battlefield 3 and one of the highest in Battlefield 4. So the fact that this gun can be so reliable at a variety of different ranges, being fairly effective up close, with its generously tight hipfire stats, and over medium distances too, makes it a worthy choice to be added to the list, sort of acting like one of the carbines, being adaptable to many situations. Next up in 4th place is the SUOMI KP31, the second fastest firing submachine gun in Battlefield 5. It's sometimes dubbed as being one of the best SMGs in service during the Second World War, and it also ended up being one of the best in the Battlefield series too, well known for its ruthless combination of power and speed. It might not pepper your targets with bullets quite as viciously as the Japanese Nambu Type 2A, but it's got the better damage model and stronger bullets, letting the SUOMI kill with less of them. Of course, that high fire rate comes with a pretty heavy recoil pattern, and considering the gun only has 20 rounds in its mags at standard, and considering those mags are going to be depleted in barely any time at all, the SUOMI's reload speeds aren't exactly fantastic to say the least, being some of the slowest in the class. But some of these big problems can be countered with specializations, giving you more ammo to play with and less upwards kick to contend with, letting you gun down more players and give you a tad more control against targets beyond point blank range. What you've got is one of the Battlefield series' most successful aggressive weapons, designed for offensive tactics and nothing more. It's not perfect, and it'll sometimes leave you in a few awkward spots, fumbling around with those magazines. But there aren't many weapons in Battlefield that can perform quite so well within those close to medium distances. In 3rd place is the MPX from Battlefield 4, which is arguably one of the best weapons in that game, due to how it performs so well with aggressive playstyles, all while still performing adequately over further ranges than quite a few of its other rapid-firing counterparts. Shooting at the speed of 850 RPM, the MPX fires fast, but not too fast, to the point where you can't control its kick, or control the rate at which those bullets are going to be dispensed. It's pretty much in the middle between the BDWs that fire at the mid sort of rate, and the ones that shoot really fast, kinda being at a nice medium point where it's just about right in the game. Still having some competitive kill times for close quarter combat, giving you a decent advantage in short range gunfight, but still being a tad more effective beyond those closer sight lines too. But one rare thing that the MPX has that a lot of other guns don't is a perfectly balanced recoil pattern, due to its vertical and horizontal recoil kicking at 0.36 degrees each. This isn't too bad considering how quick the MPX shoots, and because they're all equal, it's not going to drift to a specific side or jolt upwards in any kind of erratic way, making it feel fairly predictable and easy to control. An all around really top PDW with a lot of strong stats. We all knew this gun had to be on here somewhere, and although it's a painfully annoying gun to get killed by, one of those reasons is because it's just so bloody popular, and there's plenty of reasons why it is. In case you haven't played Battlefield 1 before, if you haven't, you should probably get out of that cave on the moon. The HELLRIEGEL was easily one of the most controversial guns that appeared in it, down to the fact that it was just so bloody effective. Despite the fact that the weapon was never really properly serviced in the war, essentially being a bit of a weird prototype. Considering it was an SMG, it used some pretty big drum magazines, and had a really manageable recoil pattern, fired at a fast but controllable rate, killed in the same number of shots as most of the other assault class weapons, and generally acted like the ultimate good all-rounded SMG that was very reliable and very easy to use in most scenarios. Almost too easy. Although the HELLRIEGEL did go through a pretty big number of nerfs over its time in Battlefield 1, starting out like a bit of a god gun right at the beginning, it still retains a lot of its strong stats to make it a viable weapon worth using. It's probably got the best balance of power, speed and accuracy in the class, all whilst being able to hold more bullets than a lot of the light machine guns. And although it's often considered to be a bit of a newbie thing to use, there's no denying that it's one of the best weapons in the game, and definitely one of the most effective SMGs in the Battlefield franchise, even if it might be a bit of a pain in the arse. So probably my personal favourite submachine gun in the Battlefield games is the M1928A1 in Battlefield 5, which a lot of you guys will most likely know as the Tommy gun. Acting in a similar way to the SUOMI, the M1928A1 is a fast, aggressive SMG that excels closer to all the chaos. It might seem a bit tricky to control at times, especially over medium ranges, but in a way it still feels like the best balanced fast-firing SMG overall, only shooting a tiny bit slower than the SUOMI, but having far better reload speeds and a slightly more level horizontal recoil pattern. The M1928A1 is capable of firing at a really competitive 900 RPM through specializations, but a far more useful specialization would be the extended magazine, giving you over twice as many shots than standard at 50 rounds. And this basically gives you a far more competitive gun overall than most of the other fully automatic weapons in the game, having that really nice combination of a decent fire rate, fairly fast reloads, somewhat manageable recoil within short to medium distances, along with having more bullets than nearly everyone else on the battlefield, which is essentially everything you could possibly want from a short-range submachine gun. Plenty of shots to keep you going when there's lots of enemies around, lots of firepower for offensive play, and generally a lot of good stats to make the Thompson a really effective killer machine all around. Well, that's pretty much it for this one, folks, and I know a lot of you guys are going to be racing down to the comments right now to post the "Where's the SMG 0818" comments, but I'm going to have to be honest and say that, although that gun's good, it's a bit overrated in the Battlefield community. I kinda see it as a slightly more aggressive but less versatile version of the HELLRIEGEL, but it is still a decent weapon at the end of the day, hence why it gets a mention. Just not one of my personal favourites. With that said, let me know which submachine guns are your personal favourites, no doubt the SMG 0818 for a lot of you guys, and make sure you visit my channel if you want to see loads more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in that next episode.